Oh, well, I'm so happy that you all have joined us today. Thank you so much for meditating, for practicing meditation with us. I every week I will ask you if you have any requests, but I'll ask you if you do to drop me a line in the chat. And if you do, I promise that I'll incorporate your request for the following week. But for us today, we are going with the flow. We are going to try to flow like water. I hope you like this meditation. Please let me know if you ever have any concerns or comments or questions. I'll always stay on for a few minutes at the end if you ever need to speak to me. And otherwise, I hope that you have a relaxing practice today and you feel better when you walk away than when you stepped into practice. If you're able to leave your desk chair, come on back to a space with me that's comfortable. Now, if you are staying in your desk chair, that's totally fine. But what I'll request is that as you get comfy, you use the back of your chair for support. So we are lengthening our spines up the back of anything we're leaning on. If you're on the floor but you want support, you could use a wall. And then if you're in a chair, you're going to, if you can, slip off your shoes and try to ground through the bottoms of your feet. Even if you have socks on, that'll be a better connection than feet in shoes. Now, for those of us who are on the floor, we're already grounding in many different ways. So like my ankles are touching the floor. You can find any position that's very comfortable for you. What we're looking for, my friends, is an erect spine without stiffness or rigidity in your spine. So to help us get there, let's just take a couple of movements and then we'll ease into stillness in our practice. Once you've chosen a spot to land, if you get uncomfy while we're practicing, try not to fight through that. Just readjust yourself. Come back to us when you can. My name is Tiffany. Welcome to your practice. Let's take a stretch to the sky. And if you're at work and this feels silly to you, you can leave this part out and just sit and start to settle yourself right away. Once you've taken that in-breath, land both hands to the right side. And then we're going to take a couple of super slow no shakes with our head. So we'll peek over the right shoulder, bring our eyes back to center, peek over the right shoulder, and bring our eyes back to center. Let's hold around the right collarbone area, and then take a super slow yes nod, looking up to the sky, and then tucking chin down towards collarbone. As your chin comes about parallel to the floor again, slide it back to me, please. Sweep your arms to the sky. This is an in-breath. Let's take a big uplifting, energizing breath in. And as your hands land to the left this time, if you're in a chair, you could use the arm or the seat or your leg if it's there. We'll move our eyes to the left, our super slow motion nod no. Bring them back to me. Soften down through your jaw. If your teeth are together, see if we can unclench bottom from the top. As you make your way back to the left side, let's take that very slow motion nod up and down. Sometimes our necks hold a lot of tension, depending on how we look at our screens. So it's nice to ease out of that. Eyes back to me, fingers back to me. For our seated position, we're going to try to tuck our chins back a little bit. That way we feel lengthening through the backs of our necks. If you feel the back of your neck with your fingers, there are no wrinkles back there. And then I like to envision like an apple or an orange underneath your chin, and you're just kind of hugging that there. Chin should be about parallel to the floor. Try to find this beautiful posture, not just for your yoga. I know it's hard when we're jutting forward to look at screens, but really try to imprint this in your memory, your posture as it is now, so that you can revisit this through the day. Just a simple posture check is very re-engaging, using our core to sit tall and re-energizing as we lengthen our spines. Now, while we practice today, 2 ways to take the eyes. Pardon me. I like to take my eyes down to something that's really bland on the floor. So you're not looking at a notebook or a phone, just kind of looking down at something that's pretty boring. And that way you're not distracted by stimulation. Then I take my eyes to little tiny slits so I can still see and I don't feel disoriented, but I'm looking through my lashes so things are a little blurry and unfocused. And if it feels okay for you, you're safe, you can close your eyes completely. That's the best way to practice. Don't fall asleep on me though. It's another reason I like to keep my eyes gently open so I don't feel like I'm gonna fall asleep. Okay, yogis, the hardest part, meditators, yogis, humans, friends, however you classify yourself, the hardest part is over. We have made it to the practice. Now we're just beginning the process of settling in. I've chosen today a theme of being or flowing like water for two reasons. We were talking before class about the change in the weather and the season and the lightness and the brightness. So I have major spring fever and I love the ocean and I just want to be at the ocean. So water is very nice for me to think of this time of the year because it puts me in a good place mentally. I hope that you feel the same. But more importantly, water is a very soft, easily moving and flowing and yielding substance. Water can overcome rigidity, hardness, right? Think about how water might move over, let's say, coral or a jagged boulder, and over time it erodes and it wears away the prickly edges and starts to make it really smooth. Or perhaps you think of sea glass, how it starts really sharp and then it softens and smooths out, all because of water. And how does this apply to us, even if we're not lovers of water? Well, we may feel very rigid in our minds. So we think in categories and fixed ideas that can be what feels like a crutch for our survival. It might feel like it's creating clarity in a chaotic universe, but thinking really rigidly within a box has negative consequences. It can limit our perception, and we can become stuck, hence the word rigid, stuck in our ideas of how things are supposed to be. Think of someone who is really closed-minded, or a time in your life, maybe you can admit, like, I was pretty closed-minded during that. We've all been there, we're all humans. So this rigidity is not what we want to embody at all times. Think about the universe, think about the seasons, as we were just chatting about. Everything in nature is ever changing. It's more complex than our eyes, our minds can ever comprehend. There's so much going on that we don't even see. In a recent practice, we used a flower blooming as an example. Think about all we don't see under the surface, the roots, the soil, the water, everything that's nurturing that bud to come open. So a more fruitful approach to life would be a more flexible mindset that enables us to just flow right along. Something like water may be. So I'm pretty sure you've probably heard of this guy, but there's an ancient Chinese philosopher, a renowned author, Lao Tzu, and he has a timeless work called the Tao Te Ching. Celebrating flexibility in this book, and he opposes rigid lifestyles, which could be the stance that we choose to take in life. So in contrast to what we may think, the ability to yield, to give a little, can actually be a great sign of strength. Now that's according to Taoist philosophy. So you may or may not fully agree with that, but I always feel like a better person when I feel like I'm movable, I'm graceful, I'm easy, I'm going with the flow. Lao Tzu states that the supreme good is like water. So let's explore today how we can be a bit less rigid and a bit more movable like water. The ways in which nature moves like this are all encompassing. Think about how the universe works to manifest a sense of ongoing change, just constantly yielding, constantly moving with energy. If we were to observe nature closely, we see different forces that are at work. And hopefully these words ring a bell with you too. Some people pronounce it yin and yang. I say yin and yang, but yin and yang, however you pronounce them, are the feminine and the masculine. So we might feel during the day consumed by our yang side, which is our more active elements within our existence. So speed, maybe we're rushing around to make our meetings. Perhaps a sense of restlessness. We're trying to be really productive. That's a yang trait. Maybe we feel overly excited or aggressive. Outgoingness. Those are all yang qualities. But also with that, think of what goes along with those qualities that we embody, such as hardness, stiffness, maybe even a sense of dryness. Whereas the yin side consists of more passive things, such as silence, receptivity, as opposed to reactivity, softness, flexibility. Now the catch, the big kicker here is that I feel that our culture celebrates the yang aspects of life. It's always the do more, go hard. How much can you achieve? Faster, bigger, more, better, right? Defending yourself, confronting someone else, rather than feeling or accepting or being open-minded to adaptability. That's what we're hoping to consider cultivating today, our more yin side, being receptive to opposing opinions. And I don't want to put anyone into a box, but we might feel like this is more challenging as a more masculine individual. Being willing to change your views or being open to others' opinions can sometimes be seen as weak. So today, let's try to open our hearts, to open our minds. Be willing to maintain a certain sense of flexibility. Be willing to change our approach to handling something or our viewpoints on a specific topic. To bend, to change, to move with the winds of life, just like a tree branch does. So sometimes you'll notice those branches become stiff and rigid, they're dead, and then they break off, right? So we want to be like the bendy tree branches and move on with whatever life throws at us. If we were to observe any body of water, you probably already noticed this, but you could discover as you observe it that it's very open to change. So it can take on different forms. If we talk about that boulder that we spoke about earlier, if it's out of the ground, out of the water, the water is going to move around it. If we were to pour water into any shape of a glass, it becomes that shape. When it's part of the ocean, it turns into waves. When it's in the river, it flows in a certain direction. It even adapts to temperature. Depending on the outside air, the temperature changes. When we cook it, when we boil it, it begins to evaporate. And when it's frozen, it becomes solid. So water is an amazing example of how I hope that we can hope together to maintain beautiful lives, surviving through all different circumstances by adapting. Now, sometimes water can be aggressive. We think of like a really big wave, like a tsunami or something. But for the most part, the softness of water adds strength to living things. Think about like our bodies, how they're comprised of so much water, and that adds strength, making our bodies flexible and more resilient to outside circumstances. And from the book we talked about earlier, Lao Tzu states in that book that living things, specifically he says the living, are soft and yielding. The dead are rigid and stiff. Thinking about that tree or plants like we talked about earlier, Plants are flexible and tender when they're alive, and they're brittle, dry, and breakable when they're dead. Just like plants or nature, when we become brittle and dry, we break more easily. That goes the same for our mind. If we're really rigid and stern, it's easy to become broken when others don't accept what we are feeling very strongly about. We can have difficulty dealing with change. If we are desiring permanence and not dealing with change, uncertainty coming our way can be very disorienting. But as we all know, change is inevitable. Life as a whole is totally impermanent. If it were permanent, it would be completely lifeless. So we want it to be impermanent like this. But in order to go with the flow, to be like water, we have to try to accept the reality of impermanence. And instead of wasting energy fighting the inevitable, we start to embrace change as it comes in different forms. Maybe we experience little small changes and try to promise ourselves that we're going to go with the flow a little easier there. So for example, with my workplace friends, we might have a new colleague or maybe a new boss. That could be a really huge change. I do realize that. But like, think of something that could be bigger, like you have to move to a new country, or there's divorce or death in your life. That's so much bigger than something small, like a change in your work personnel. Now, if we were to compare our life to the river we mentioned earlier, there are these subtle twists and turns, which we could think about as small changes, just going with the flow. A drastic change in course would represent a big change. No matter what, we notice that water will continue thriving, finding a new way if it needs to, flowing with the changing of circumstances, perhaps even adapting to completely different landscapes if it has to shift direction or course, finding its way past any obstructions with most likely minimal effort. And even if the river was completely cut off, like sometimes I think of like a dam or even like a beaver dam or something that's in the way, most likely without resistance, that water will simply merge through the earth and find its way into a new water source. And thus, water can live in this continuous flow, finding ways around anything that crosses its path. Do you think we could open our hearts and minds to being more like that? Living in a state of flow, finding ways around what we may perceive as troubles or obstacles in our path. Maybe we try not to resist or give less resistance towards even the most drastic of changes in our life, things that might just stop us in our tracks completely. Think about if we don't flow, if we were still, like if we were water inside a mason jar, we'd be still. We would just be in that jar until the circumstances changed. But when they did and the water spilled out, we would go with the flow again. The power of softness, of yielding, of finding and accepting a sense of grace and ease is amazing. And in thinking about how water can erode things, we know that soft can overcome hard. Water being soft and flexible, but it could erode things that are super tough, like rock or metal. So one of the other quotes by Lao Tzu is that everyone knows that soft and yielding overcomes rigid and hard. A few can put this knowledge into practice, which is why I'm bringing it to you today. Let's promise ourselves and one another that we will do our best to be or to become more like water, knowing plant this deep seed within yourself, this sense of knowingness that if we can become soft and learn how to yield, we can overcome hard things. So instead of forcing our way through things, we'll try to flow through things. Do you ever notice? I'll just give you a little example of a simple practice. Well, it's challenging, but it's simple in mind. It's simple to say and think about committing to that I'm trying to do in my life to become a softer human being. If you think about being hard, moving fast, like if you're a hard walker and stomp around your house, you make a lot of noise, that uses, you could say it wastes so much energy, right? And then just envision like a very soft way of moving. You know, you're not bumping into things or landing hard on your feet. Just that subtle change in the way you carry yourself can become the softness. I also try to apply this when I'm standing. So we all probably have to wait in grocery lines. This is a time where I try to soften everything. And I'm not talking about like just slumping over your cart handle. I'm just talking about still carrying yourself proudly and like you are in your meditation today with this posture that's beautiful and confident, but yet softening around your bones or softening into your joints. And the other big time that I try to put this into practice, just because this is something we do so often, is when I'm tidying up or when I'm cleaning. So we like to get through those types of things quickly, right? Because most of us don't enjoy cleaning. So I noticed that I would get really aggressive when I was cleaning, and I would be like, back is hurting and I'm sweating, I'm stressed out. But instead, I've been trying to just like breathe and move slowly, be super bendable, almost like I am water cleaning. So I'm just like moving gently. Instead of stretching really far, I'm stepping forward as I'm stretching, just trying to find this sense of softness. And I am definitely not going to sit here and tell you that I have been able to change in a day, but throughout the day, I remind myself, oh, right, take a breath, step back for a minute, approach with softness, try not to be so aggressive, so rushy, so quick, so rigid, so forceful. Those are just little small things that we can try to implement. And I also don't want you to misinterpret that I'm saying we should never use force. Because of course there are life situations where we should be assertive and forceful. I'm just talking about the everyday, moving away from rigidity and moving into a sense of softness in our minds, in our bodies, in our hearts. When it comes to long-term, let's just say longevity or long-term wellness, being a softer person, cultivating first, but then maintaining a tranquil mind will help us save our energy and will last longer. We don't want to be the Energizer battery. We want to be a chill battery that doesn't need to keep going and going and going. So as we begin to close our practice together, my friends, remember that softness is strength. In softness, we find strength. Do you ever notice that soft things don't break very easily because they're bending, they're yielding, but hard, brittle, rigid things will break easily. And we remember that even the hardest rocks can be overcome by the gentleness of water. Or if water really turns you off, if you're not a fan of water, you could think about breeze, wind. You know, even wind can change things. So we'll try to promise ourselves to not get set into one rigid form and instead to adapt, to build our own mindset, heart space, embody softness, and let ourselves grow, move, find freedom and a sense of subtle softness, just like water. Take a big breath in through your nose. See how softly you can breathe, not forcing this either. And then as you exhale, let your lips part, open mouth, sigh of exhalation. I hope that your day today is fluid, it's gentle, it's graceful and easy. I hope you feel a little more like water today. Landing our hands on our heart space or bringing a prayer to our heart center. Closing our practice with gratitude, dropping our chins towards our hearts in a gentle sign of love and affection for making it to our practice today. As I bow to you, my friends, it is in respect for your commitment to your practice and in gratitude for allowing me to lead you. Namaste, meaning that my light honors, recognizes, and is inspired by the light that you are sending out as well. Have a beautiful day today.